Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Didikanku with your host, David. Today, we have a special guest. She is Ambassador of Environmental Awareness and Climate Coach. Her name is Coach Amanda Katili. Coach Amanda, welcome.
Hi, Coach David. Thank you so much for taking up the issue. It's really rare that people will talk about environment and climate in podcasts. There are some though, but they should be interesting.
Well, I think it's a pleasure to have you. And I think the environment and climate is a very important issue that should be addressed, especially in this day and age, and especially since we're talking to an audience around the world. I think this is a global issue. So it's an honor to have you. And we hope to learn a lot from you and hear from your sharing. So for some of the audience who don't know you, I do know that you have a lot of experience as an environmental specialist, and you've even done some seminars, some lectures on environmental awareness. But for some of the audience or listeners who don't really know you, can you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you get into becoming an environmental specialist? What motivated you to really like focus on the environment and environmental awareness? Was there a particular point in your life where you kind of said, okay, this has to change, or something in the future is going to happen?
Yeah, well, I believe I can look at it from different angles, from my life experience, from my educational experience, as well as from my professional experience. I was born in Bandung, and you know how West Java has beautiful sceneries. Uh,
Mhm.
my father, my father, a geologist, used to take us on weekends to the mountainous areas in West Java. So
Wow.
I built up the interest about plants from then on. But back when I was still in my elementary school, there was only one TV channel at that time, if you remember, or maybe you're too young at that
I
time.
don't, I
And
don't think I was here yet.
so it's a black and white TV, but the show that I loved the most was the Undersea World series by Jacques Cousteau. Can you
Oh, okay.
imagine?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. It's black and white, but how could I become so interested? It's black and white. And he went underwater to the Mediterranean Sea, to the Indian Ocean,
Right.
underwater all over the world. So naturally, when I was going to college, I took biology as my major.
Mm.
And from then on, I moved on. After biology, I took plant ecology. But then, because I don't like working in labs, I don't like working under microscope.
Mm.
So I like to go out. So I went to take the plant ecology as a subject, and then moving on to my advanced degree on environmental management. And then
Wow.
the last 15 years, of course, it's climate change.
Wow.
And I've worked with the government, NGOs, international organizations,
Wow.
consulting companies, NGOs, you name it. After after all, I've been in the subject for well more than 30 years,
Right.
but I always have a common thread. I don't want to venture too far away from the environment subject, from life sciences. So that's
Sorry,
always me.
everything you've said, like you've worked with NGOs, governments, this already brings me like so many questions I want to ask you about what kind of governments, what kind of NGOs, what kind of work you've done, what kind of impact you've had. Um, but before we go into there, I think something that piques my curiosity is your father was already a geologist. So would you say
Mhm.
that he kind of planted that seed in you by taking you out into nature? introducing you, as you said, taking you on those trips. Was that kind of how it started?
Yeah, and he was a professor at ITB, Bandung Institute of Technology.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah, and when he wrote a scientific article, he didn't care. I was only like 11 years old.
Right.
And then he would say, read this. What do you think about this? And then and then he would take me to his meetings with scientists, international scientists. At that time, I didn't know how to speak English, right?
Right.
So I knew some, but then when his colleagues talked to me, then I listened partly, and then I had to think, what am I going to say next?
Right.
So
Wow. So you were already kind of brought into the world of environmental awareness or environmental care from a very early age through the help of your father, like encouraging you to read some of the things
mhm.
that he was writing, joining meetings. Wow, at 11 years old, this is a lot to take in, you know. I remember when I was 11 years old, my father trying to get me to read, not my father, but in school, we had to learn English literature. And reading some of that literature just made my head hurt. So I
That
can't.
make my head hurt. Yeah, yeah, that's true.
But I can imagine the impact that it had on you. So it also seems though that you kind of figured out that you don't want to be someone stuck in a lab. You want to be someone out there. You're a people person.
Mhm.
You want to be someone who's actually taking action rather than just doing research. Is that right?
Right. Doing research, fine, but not, cooped up in a lab like 24/7, for example.
Right, right. And did you ever do lab work, and what was that like?
Oh yeah, of course I had to. And then it was an experience that I didn't want to repeat. For example, in the first years of school, like I said, I took biology as a major. We had to cut some frogs,
Yeah.
see what's inside. And to make the muscle still intact, we had to use a guillotine, to cut the
Right.
head of the frog.
Right, right. I
So
remember that, dissecting frogs.
that's the thing that I really didn't like.
Okay. Okay, okay. So you didn't like dissecting things. I didn't like it either. I'm quite squeamish when it comes to blood. But tell me more about the environmental side. So you actually continued your education, as you mentioned earlier, and got more into the environmental side. Then you started working with different governments, NGOs. So what was the first project you worked on? Maybe you can walk us through like your first journey, the first time that you worked on a project to build awareness for the environment, and then what was the reception like the first time when you did that?
It was the reception was not good, it was in early 80s.
Mm,
My thesis, my undergraduate thesis was related to mining and environment.
mm,
So I went in and out mining companies to see the environmental impacts of mining activities.
right.
And you could imagine how the mining engineers hated me at that time
I'm
because
sure.
it's like I was looking into their mistakes.
Mm,
There was not much regulations at that time. But then it got better because the government started to care about the issue, and there were again regulations, coming out.
mm.
That's when people begin to care about the environment.
Wow. So you
So
were part of that, were you? You were part of building that awareness and helping the government to create these regulations, or that happened while you were creating this awareness?
Well, at first I was really into field work to find some data, to find some information, and whether my hypothesis worked or not. Eventually, I worked for the government. That's when I started helping find some facts and some data that could help into policy making.
Wow, wow. Because yeah, I mean, the effects that I think, especially in the past, I believe in the 80s, early 90s even, towards even the early 2000s, where people were like coal mining, I think nickel mines, and then just leaving it, basically like leaving the mines empty and barren. And I think what happened is some of them even like just put garbage inside and then covered it up again. That is quite devastating to the environment, right? So, what are some other things that you've done to build awareness other than like focusing on the mining industry? Are there other things in general that you've done for the general public to do? Because I think that there's quite an issue, especially in Asian countries. Living in Indonesia, you know, I've seen rivers filled with bottles. Right now, I'm in the countryside of Chiawi, and on the side of the road, people just throw their rubbish right on the side of the street in front of a sign that says, "Do not throw rubbish here," and that is where they throw their rubbish. So in general, what have you done to create awareness for like the general population?
Right. After I received my PhD and then went to some international meetings, national scientific meetings, writing papers, then I realized, oh, what's the point? You spend so much time doing research, writing paper, while only a few people understand what you're writing or what you're saying.
Right.
Then I started doing this public awareness work. And since I have some information, some experience, people started inviting me to come to, you know, give lectures, not really lectures, but then public awareness activities to students, to associations, even to government offices, and also again being invited back to the United States to talk to the universities there, so that they would understand what's happening in Indonesia right now, right then, and what the government was doing to tackle the issue. So I was comfortable doing that, not only because I already had the degree at that time, but because I already have some experience to talk to people. Because then you have to walk the talk, right? You cannot just talk from some scientific information only.
Right.
And then eventually, that was in the early 2000s. And then while I was working for the government, I've always been invited again to give some issues, some lectures, some activities, focus group discussion, one-on-one sharing, and different audience. That's what I like about public awareness.
Sorry, just to clarify, so what are some of the main issues that you would discuss in these forums?
Before the global crisis, I started talking about the global climate crisis in 2005.
Right.
But before then, it depends on the audience. If I'm talking for an industry, right, a different industry, for example, a textile industry or a coal mining industry, of course, we'll talk about their process and see the environmental impact of each step of the process, and then what's the solution, and then what they could do, or what tools they already have in their companies, or what regulations that they had to listen to, they had to apply some standards, for example.
Okay, so
But
this could
that's
be,
basically,
sorry, this could be something related to like a textile factory, maybe the emissions they release, or a coal mining company, maybe the how they should leave the mine after they've mined all the materials, things like that, is it? To be a bit specific for the viewers. So
yeah.
So
Yeah,
how
go
about
on.
like for general public though? This seems to be very industry, but what could the general public, or what have you done to create awareness for the general public?
Now, for the general public, it's much more interesting because you talk in general. You don't have to talk about a specific industry.
Right.
You can just say that you can talk from the ecosystem aspect, for example, that we are all related, human, environment, that we only have one Earth, the blue planet, the blue marble, and then whatever you are doing is, circulated inside the Earth, and that why pollution happens, because humans are doing excessive activities while they're just throwing their waste. In the early days, nature can still absorb the waste, but the population increase and technology is being more advanced. So there are lots of waste thrown out without any protection.
Right.
So what can you do, for example, and also what's happening, the impact about biodiversity, about plants, about animals. There's so many things to talk about.
Yes.
Especially the interaction between human and their environment. And what's interesting about Indonesia is we have traditional wisdoms.
Right.
That we have to care about our relationship with the Supreme Being, our relationship with nature, our relationship with our fellow human beings.
Right.
So it becomes more interesting depending on the audience, of course.
Right.
Because they
So
would
would
like
you
to
say,
talk about
sorry,
different
so
things.
would you say the reception then with the audience that you have talked to has been very positive? And just, you've had so much experience. What has been the major change in your 30 years of experience? What have you seen to be the major change in maybe people's mindsets, or even in the environment in general, that has come through the awareness, I guess, that you have given to people?
It's not, I'm not alone in this.
Right.
Right. Because there are some organizations, there are some champions as well. You cannot do it by yourself.
Sure.
So I cannot say it's my impact, but what I've seen so far is a change in awareness, especially in the younger generation. They're really much more interested. Although it's not a younger generation, if you talk to communities and you're using lots of visuals, like what I'm doing in the last 15 years, then there will be much more interest, especially if you show what's the human's impact on the environment. Then people would like to know what they could do. So there has been some change, of course, depending on the way you present the facts, the science, if possible, even though basic science, the impact, the solutions, and actions that you could do.
Right.
And then, of course, in the call to action is important. It's not only, you're sharing the information, but there has to be a call to action.
Right.
What are you going to do after this? What are you going to do after this gathering, for example? So that's how it works.
So a call for action could be like, do a recycling initiative, or plant a tree, or just clean up the garbage in your community, something like that, is it?
Right. It's very, very simple and doable, and you don't have to do everything.
Right.
But if you do it individually, and then many more people are doing that, of course you will give an impact. But the biggest impact will come from government policies. So there are three steps when you talk about what's the impact. How are people going to react? It depends if they do it individually, organizationally, like I said earlier, or with a corporation. And then, of course, if the government policies will give more impact on some issues.
So have you ever met resistance? I mean, you said earlier you met a lot of resistance, especially from the mining industry, but have you ever met resistance from individuals who maybe you're sharing this awareness, and maybe the reception is more like, the planet can take care of itself. As long as I don't just throw my garbage on the street, why can't I just drive my car, or I don't know, do the things that I normally do? Why do I have to care so much about the bigger picture? Have you ever met this resistance? And what have you done when you do meet this resistance?
One or two or three, maybe, but we are not a nation of deniers, not like other countries. That's why we are really very lucky, because if we share the facts, for example, what's happening, people would want to listen. For example, I talked to some farmers. I went all over Indonesia, and they listened to me, and then they said, "Ibu, if the situation is like this, let me take you to meet some of my friends from other farmers, so that they could also listen."
Wow.
See, isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's very inspirational. So they actually create a community and want to share this information. Wow.
Oh, but then again, there are some funny stories. For example, some NGO said that, well, you should not burn your boat, for example. I mean, you should not burn anything. But then they said, "Ibu, we usually burn our boat when it does not work anymore. Now, if we don't burn our boat, would you like to get our small boat?" For example, some practical things like that.
Right.
And then some of us usually share about information, international information. For example, Al Gore. I haven't talked to you about Al Gore. He's the
I think
former
he's
vice
like
president.
he's the forefront of climate change.
Right.
Yeah, I think he created that documentary about climate change.
Right.
He's very well known in the climate change and environment.
Right.
Yeah. So
I lead an organization here in Indonesia that's related to the Climate Reality Project that he established. So we were given some slides, beautiful slides, before and after impacts, and we usually use that for our public awareness activities. And some of my friends who were also trained by Al Gore went to meet some housewives, and she said, "This is Al Gore." And then they asked, "Ibu, who is Al Gore? Is he a kiai? Is he a religious leader?"
Question. How did you respond to that?
It's not me, it's my friend. But then we realized, we have to see the context. We cannot just use everything. It has to depend on the audience. But this organization, the Climate Reality Project, Al Gore with scientists, activists, and communicators, train people all over the world. there were almost 40,000 volunteers that he called climate reality leaders in 170 countries. And we were given, all kinds of tools and skills, and we were connected. We are all connected. Right. So the visuals really helped. That's why then I begin to understand that you cannot just talk with tables, with graphs. Sometimes it's just one picture, but it's self-explanatory. Right. You can make people understand what's happening out there.
Right, right. Well, something you mentioned earlier also, like one of the biggest impacts that can help the environment is more government regulation. This makes me a bit curious because a lot of people like to think that smaller government or less regulation actually helps to help the economy grow. Because more regulation means that you have to jump through more loopholes, you have to go through more bureaucracy, everything slows down. What would you say to those people?
If you talk about the climate crisis, it's a global issue, and the solution has to be global as well. So that's why there are international conventions. Yeah. And members of the United Nations agree to sign the convention, and then they will ratify those conventions into laws and regulations in countries. Right. You cannot avoid that. You cannot avoid that if it's a global crisis. Right. But then again, there has to be public consultation. Right now, the way we solve this issue is not by government only, but there are non-government actors. And that's where conversations are really going, and how to solve the issues that you mentioned. So it has to be a win-win situation. Right. It cannot be, you cannot just say no to this, no to that, and then sacrificing the economy, for example. You cannot do that. Right. That's why it's a really long and difficult negotiation if you're talking about the climate crisis.
Right, I'm sure. And now you're a climate coach. So I know there's lots of different fields of coaching. So I want to go a little bit into the coaching side here. Like I myself, I'm more of a personal development executive coach. I've talked to parenting coaches, business coaches. I think you're the first climate coach I've talked to. So what exactly is a climate coach? Like, who do you coach?
This is really interesting because I've been working on the issue for more than 30 years, and I've been telling people what to do. These are the threats. These are the things that you have to do. These are the regulations. And those are the stakeholders. You have to work together, cooperate, things like that. But then I came into coaching. At first, I would like to be a life coach. I really would like to be a life coach. I figure, well, I've been doing lots of technical works for so many years. So why don't I, learn what life coach is? Because, you always face problems, not necessarily about environment and climate, right? Right. There are some private, personal problems.
There's lots of problems in life. Life is full of problems. Let's agree on that.
Right. So, but then after I took this certificate with Coaching Indonesia, then I asked myself, well, I'm in the environment and climate. Is there any climate coach or coaching related to environment and climate? And then apparently there are some people and there are some organizations working on this issue. So then I took another course. This time, it's from a UK organization,
Mm.
two organizations actually, because there are no climate coaches here yet.
Right.
Maybe there are, but
Well,
I don't know.
maybe you're the first one. Maybe you're going to lead the way.
I hope so. So then I took a course on climate coaching. Like all kinds of coaching, you don't have to know the technical issues like carbon emissions, right?
Right.
They talk more about, again, like other coaching practices, more on individuals, and they're talking about the sense of doing, the sense of being, and then also you have to know where you are now. Are you curious? And then if you're curious, do you want to know more? Are you now informed? Are you now involved? Are you now active? So there are stages.
Interesting.
Right. And then of course they also have coaching tools, but not many, but there are. And mostly, of course, related to Earth. What's your relationship with the Earth? And then connect to nature, presencing. And I'm not used to that. I'm really not used to that. Before a session, for example, sit still, listen to the music. Imagine that you're listening to the birds, to the sound of the waves. I said, what? I have no patience in doing this.
Interesting.
So, but then again, they said, express your anger. How do you feel that the earth is, in this kind of crisis? Or are you overwhelmed? That kind of thing.
Right.
And I said, we are Indonesians. We are not used to express our grief about the earth, right?
Right.
Have you heard people, expressing their grief, their anger about the earth?
Well, I think
right?
Indonesians in general don't express their anger. They kind of keep it inside until it explodes. Even if it's not earth related, work related, even they seem to keep it to themselves. I think it's a cultural thing here.
Right. And they smile even though there are floods, even though they're swimming, staying away from the floods, they're still smiling, right?
Kids join in and start jumping in the water.
But the most interesting thing is I try to apply this, presencing, connect to nature and everything. When I give a presentation, I usually try to do that, with students. And it worked. They're interested. Because I told them I cannot, right away talking about the earth is in crisis.
Right.
You have to have a sense of belonging about this earth first. Then you would want to know what's happening and how to solve it.
Right.
So actually, my courses, my climate change classes really work. Climate change coaching.
So as a climate coach, what you're doing is you're helping people become more aware of how their environment, how it impacts their personal well-being. Is that right?
That, and then also, that's what I find very hard, not telling people what to do, right?
Right.
So,
but you need
all this information,
Right. But yeah, you have all this knowledge and data that you probably want to tell them, look, guys, this is the truth, this is the data. But through coaching, what you're trying to do is guide them to find, maybe lead them towards how can they do this research themselves, right? Is that what you try to do as a climate coach? Like try to For example, there's a philosopher, um, Jordan Peterson. Maybe you've heard of him, but he talks about, if you want to have a good life, you need to organize your life, and the way you do that is first organize your surroundings. And
Mhm.
if your surroundings are surrounded by garbage and clutter, then how can you organize your life if you can't even
Mhm.
organize your environment? And
Mhm. Mhm.
I think that's a really good point here. That's kind of the
Mhm.
message I'm getting from you as a climate
Mhm.
coach. Is
Mhm.
is it could be a way where people can actually organize their life by seeing if my environment is nice and
Mhm.
my environment is kept well, then my life and my quality of life can be better. I can have a clearer mindset. I can have a clearer idea. Um, like my mind won't be so cluttered with garbage.
Mhm. Mhm. Right, but there are many interesting things, of course.
Right.
You just explained about what an individual would like to do, for example.
Yeah.
But some individuals also would like to relate this coaching to their career in the
Mm,
field.
sure.
Uh, for example, one said that I would like to be a professor. So then we had a coaching session,
Mm,
and again inspire the coachee, and then the steps, goals, reality, options, those terms.
right.
But then again, there are some who would like to really work through coaching for this for their zero waste business,
Mm,
or sustainable fashion business, for
right,
example,
right.
recycling business. It's really interesting. And some
Okay.
students, for example, they have apps, related to climate, related to the environment, that they would like to explore, but they don't have the confidence, for
Right.
example, on how to go about that. But then after the coaching session, they realize that, well, I could do that. Now, talking to you, I realized that there are things that I should have done, but I haven't done because of this.
Wow,
So many,
that's
many, many issues.
that's
Right.
fascinating and you bring up a really interesting point there,
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
actually this climate coaching can be very useful for people
Mm-hmm.
in all sorts of areas. I think I don't
Mm-hmm.
need to mention
Mm-hmm.
them again. You've already mentioned a lot of them, but like I said, maybe you will be the first climate coach, and there'll be others joining in, and the environment, there'll be more awareness. But talking about awareness and environmental awareness, I want to go back a little bit here. What tips could you give to some of the viewers and listeners here who are interested to make some impact, maybe in their communities or in their personal life, regarding the environment? And what tips can you give to maybe the millennial or Gen Z generation? For example, the Gen Z are now the generation that are taking over. Millennials, and I think before millennials are baby boomers. But what can each generation pass on to each generation, if we look at environmental awareness? What are some tips that you could give right now?
So let me not really clarify, but if people ask me, what do you do? Right now, I say I'm an executive coach, mentor, and trainer, specializing in environmental management, climate actions, and sustainability practices.
Right.
So it's everything under the cloud. But it's it's really related to your question. There are some organizations who are developing what you could do, especially for millennials. Even the United Nations, they are developing an app for cell phones on 10 things you could do to help the environment, to preserve the environment. And it's very easy. There are hundreds of tips on the internet, but we all know some of them, like, for example, save energy by turning the light off if you're going out of the room, for example. Take the electricity out of the socket, and carpool. Don't use single-use plastic bags, because right now there are 5 trillion plastic bags every year being thrown out, just used once, for example.
Right.
And
Sorry. Talking about that, it comes to mind that now a lot of people are using masks, and even those masks are just being thrown out. What could be done about that as well? Like, people probably throw out disposable masks. Like, I know if I wear a mask, I probably wear it twice and I throw it away because it's disposable. You're not meant to keep one mask forever. So
right.
I think this is a similar issue, and an issue that is important right now during the pandemic, where we need to wear masks, but we should also care about the environment. So what could be done about that as well?
There are some things that people do. Some see that as a business opportunity. For example, making masks that meets the health standards. That's one. And then another one, some people, again, like I said, see this an opportunity, recycle the mask, and then cutting the strings and using those strings for other purposes. And what's really works, of course, is a government regulation. Like I mentioned earlier, the government has issued some regulations about how to deal with medical waste. So that's that. And then plastic is, of course, the one of the most important issues. Like I mentioned, 5 trillion single-use plastic bags being thrown out every year by people all over the world. And most important is eat more plant-based food, because it really helps reduce carbon emissions that cause climate change. And buy local, again, not eat local, but buy local. Then you can help foragers, farmers, and fisher folks. So there are hundreds of things that you could do, but then again, it depends on whether you like doing that or not. Because some people, for example, they don't like to garden, but my daughter likes to garden, and she has a small business on earth-friendly products. So it depends on how you look at it and your interest. And you have to belong to a community. You have to belong to an organization that has the same cause. You see that there are lots of NGOs and lots of volunteers. And if you see the Instagram right now, the small businesses by millennials, they mostly use environmental friendly packaging.
Right.
They don't use single-use plastic bags.
Right.
So you have to join a community, because you cannot work by yourself. And of course, the social media is very important. Lots of tips there. And especially comparing to, if you talk about millennials, Gen Z, comparing their activities to their peers. That's really important. And then recording what they're doing and comparing it with their friends all over the world. That's why apps are usually popular.
So using social media and actually like
Mhm,
showing that they're making a difference, encouraging other people to make a difference
mhm,
as well.
mhm.
And then of course,
Uh,
and then of
yeah.
course, being part of communities, maybe joining an organization.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
I think something you mentioned there is something that's also very important is what are you interested in that could
mhm,
help the environment.
mhm,
For example, you said your daughter is interested in gardening.
mhm,
Perhaps someone is interested in a business where they use recycled materials to create
mhm,
something, a sculpture,
mhm,
or they take yeah, like they take masks and they take the strings and they turn it into another product that they could then
mhm.
monetize maybe. So finding your interest that can also benefit the environment seems to be quite important, wouldn't you say?
Right. Let me get back to social media because you don't just mention several popular social media, but there is a tool called Conversation Prism
Mm,
by two social media activists, and they listed social media platforms. Right now, there are 500 all over the world that you can use either for education, for photography, for movies, for sharing, for collecting information. So you don't just to focus to some that are already popular. There are
right.
others out there, even some free, apps that you can use.
Do you have any that you can share here with our audience and viewers to go for them to go on? I think you mentioned one earlier. Perhaps we can leave some links in the description for people to check out some of these social media accounts or apps.
Mhm. Right. Do you want me to write that in the chat
You
room,
you
or
can
do you?
you can share it with me and then I'll leave it in the description, or you can mention it now, and we will
Right,
put it in the description. It's up to you.
right. Of course, I would encourage um, our viewers to follow my Instagram account because there are lots of information there as well. And you can direct message me because I have this, with me all the time.
Okay.
Uh, so
All
maybe,
right. Well,
right.
sorry, so before we get to that, I think I would like some of the viewers I'm sure will want to take action, that they're probably interested in learning more. But before we get to that, our time, well, there's a few more questions I have actually regarding this, especially regarding climate coaching, because it seems to be something that you're kind of pioneering here, especially in Indonesia, and it is an important issue in Indonesia. Indonesia has so many beautiful places, and I think it's important that we preserve the beauty of a lot of the islands and nature of Indonesia. Um, but I think we'll have to leave that for another segment because we're running out of time here. But I do have a question that I like to ask all my guests, all my first time guests at least. And that question is, let's say that your time on this earth has come to an end, you're moving on to a better place. You've accomplished everything you wanted to accomplish. So you have become a accredited or a well-known climate coach. You've built environmental awareness. Now people are very, very environmentally focused. Climate is better. Maybe the climate change is not as bad as it used to be. Um, and all of these good things that you've done, you have to take with you to this better place that you're going to. And you can only leave two pearls of wisdom behind for people to remember all your work and all your, I guess, wisdom. what would be these two pearls of wisdom that you would leave behind?
The first one would be the inspiration and enthusiasm to protect the earth. And the second one is not new, but I think it's important. Publish or perish. You just have to write as many as you can for the general public, not only scientific articles. Why those two? Because, you know, science, technology, innovation, progress. So you have to keep updating the information.
Absolutely.
So you have to be inspired, you have to be enthusiastic, and then publish or perish.
Interesting. I mean, that's a very simple way to put it. Basically, share what you know, share the data, share the knowledge that you know, and also care about where you live, right? Care about the earth that you live in. Otherwise, we may not have an earth if we don't care about the earth that we live in. We may end up losing it, so to say. So yeah, those are great pearls of wisdom. And so now coming to the, how can people connect with you? What is your Instagram? Is it okay for people to connect to you directly? Like direct message you through Instagram? Do you have a website? Do you have some organizations that you can direct people to? What would they be?
Right. Social media accounts, social media handles, all Amanda Katili for Instagram and for Facebook. And, you know, friends could direct message me. I always answer, and I, you know, peek into my cell phone every 10 minutes to see whether there are messages. But there is an important information that I would like people to know. There is going to be a global training with Al Gore this coming October, and it's open for people from all over the world. Okay. And people who have been trained by him, you know, their age range is from 12 to 89. So 12 years old to 89 years old, right? You know, they attended Al Gore's training, and you don't have to have a scientific background. Perhaps later on you can put the link on the message. I'll give you the link. And when you the training will give you lots of tools, hundreds of beautiful slides. And like I mentioned earlier, you are connected to thousands of people who care about this issue in this whole world.
And not just thousands of people, but generations and generations of people.
Right.
Awesome.
Right.
So that would be great if you could give us the link to that. It's open to the public, I believe you said. So for all the listeners and viewers out there, if you're interested to connect with Coach Amanda Katili, you can find her on Facebook and Instagram using her name, Amanda Katili. That's Katili. And we will leave the link to the, is it a training or webinar?
It's a training. It's free and online.
Okay,
it's about a week. Right. It's about a week, but maybe only 2 hours a day. And then there are on-demand video, and people who like certificates will get certificates, the climate reality.
So it's a training. It's an online training, you said? Yeah,
and it's free. It's for about a week, and but maybe only about 2 hours a day. There are on-demand video, and people will get certificates and this green ring, like what I'm wearing right now, and like what Al Gore is wearing this as well in his public events. It means that you are committed to the cause, and you are working, you know, with colleagues all over the world to share how important this issue is.
You're part of the bigger picture. You're part of the organization caring for the environment, caring for a greener planet. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Very nice. All right, so we hope to get that link from you. So all the viewers, if you're interested in joining that training, I think it's a very useful, interesting training. I believe I'll be going to that training just to hear
Please do. Please do.
and find out what I can learn about what I can do to preserve the environment. I think it is an important issue. So thank you, Coach Amanda. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your sharing. Thank you to all the listeners for listening. We hope you picked up some good information. Um, as I said, Coach Amanda, I do have more questions. Perhaps we can have a follow-up session, maybe after the Al Gore training. If some of the viewers have questions or comments, I encourage you to please leave those in the comment box, and we can address them in the next session. If you've liked this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel. And we'll keep creating more content like this in the future. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Coach Amanda, for your time and for your sharing. And for now, David is signing off. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.